Every so often comes a design that is so ahead of its time, it actually warps the minds of those who see it. In 1955, the Citroen DS19 did just that at the Paris Motor Show. All the Citroen sales team could do was pacify the mob that threatened to swamp them with booking fees. They took 752 bookings in the first 15 minutes of unveiling. That's 52 bookings a minute, practically one every second. By the end of the first day, they had collected 12,000 bookings. When the show closed after 10 days, Citroen told the factory they had to build 80,000 cars. It's no wonder that Citroen fell in love with the car. In fact, they called it DS because the French word for goddess is déesse. And who can argue with that? The shape was the work of Italian sculptor turned industrial designer Flaminio Bertoni. Bertoni is a regular at Citroen. He gave them the Avant, the 2CV, and the unforgettably ugly but witty H-Van. The DS21, which replaces the 19, looks gorgeous from any angle. It looks like so many raindrops that's been cut and sectioned and recombined into something as vulgar and dysfunctional as a vehicle. Every surface looks so natural, so perfect. It's a shape that had waited 16 billion years for Bertoni to come and start chipping away at everything that's unnecessary. The DS is not just beautiful. There is also palpable tension in the design. The way the long, elegant snout droops ever so slightly forward, as if rushed by those rear tires that sit right at the end. Even at standstill, it looks like a sprinter hunched forward on the starting blocks. All done without any hint of muscle or power, just pure elegance. Because the rear tires are placed so far back, the cabin is free of any form of intrusions from wheel wells. In the DS21, you don't get a seat. What you get is a sofa. Of course, the driver gets the best seat in the house. He gets a wonderfully quirky single-spoke steering wheel that somehow manages to look purely functional while being absolutely witty and elegant. The single spoke reminds us that the steering is actually a crank or a lever for turning the front wheels, and the way the single spoke emanates from the shaft like a long, giant tongue is also a source of its wit and elegance. It's almost as if Bertoni was sticking his own tongue out at the driver or at the very idea of the car itself. Among the more interesting features that you get in the main instrument cluster of the DS21 is the electronic rev counter and the speedometer that has that interesting marking for stopping distance on dry road. For example, at 60 miles per hour, the stopping distance is 250 feet. If you go up to 85 miles per hour, the indicated stopping distance is 500 feet. And if you dare to go 110 miles per hour, it's 800 feet before you come to a dead stop. Under the bonnet sits a 4-cylinder engine. In this particular model, it's a 2.2-liter engine, displacing exactly 2,175 cc. And it looks a little lost in the spacious engine bay. In fact, the engine bay serves as a perfect reminder that this car was sculpted for elegance. The snout is at least 4 feet ahead of the engine. The radiator sits so far back from the nose that it needs ducting to bring air from the scoop under the chin. The DS was an executive car that would have competed with Mercedes-Benz, Jaguar and Maserati. And in many ways, it was better than what the other European brands came up with. The hydro-pneumatic suspension was such an improvement over anything that came up before that motoring journalists of the time waxed lyrical for days. In the minds of many people, the all-pneumatic suspension is fantastic, but it's just one more thing to go wrong. But owner James De Cruz couldn't disagree more.
Hi, James De Cruz. It's a 1972 DS, which I purchased in
Cyprus.
Cyprus, yes, that's right. It's been with me to Bangkok for the Citroen DS show
When was that?
last year.
Bangkok, how many kilometers was that?
1,800 there and back, about 1,800 kilometers.
So people are always worried about these cars being not reliable.
Didn't have a problem with it, nothing whatsoever. And now I'm planning end of this month to do another run to Vietnam or Cambodia, depending on which country. I don't need a pass for the car.
Today we brought along a modern interpretation of the idea of the DS. It comes in the form of the DS5. The DS5 is a luxury hatchback and the first model to come out under the DS brand. Citroen felt that DS should be its own brand, so they gave the Citroen DS5 a makeover and relaunched it as the DS5. Just no more Citroen in the name, that's all. The exterior is fairly conventional, but when you go inside, then the spirit of the DS is stronger. Inspired by aircraft cockpit design, the DS cocoons the driver and passengers, making them feel protected. The dashboard is fairly conventional. The only homage to the past is the rectangular clock that blends into the start button. Among the more interesting features of the cabin is the individually operated glass roof, which allows the driver and front passenger to determine their own level of sun. The rear passengers can also choose to enjoy the sun or be shaded. The center of the roof is also lined with control switches for the head-up display. The roof-mounted switches adds to the glamour of the cockpit-inspired design. Overall, the DS5 feels quite special inside. While it may never be compared to the original DS other than in name, it is an interesting interpretation of modern luxury. A break from the norm. Well, okay, it's not a clean break, but at least a deviation. And for that, we should celebrate the effort. If enough people buy the DS5, maybe it'll give Citroen the courage to be more adventurous.